Frederic Chopin was a genius piano virtuoso and composer who, I think, in his short life managed to say more than whole schools of philosophy could ever dream of. Yet, he barely read books at all, did not have any notable speeches, and his only writings were unremarkable personal letters. Furthermore, he's not relevant at all outside the small circle of classical music. So what am I on about? Chopin made me realize something without writing down or uttering a single syllable. And well, that is a good TLDR to this video, but there is so much in his wordless philosophy that I figured it'd be worth our time to go really in depth here. He made me realize that despite their praise, words can rarely do justice to the truth, not to mention beauty. Words are crude and more often than not manipulative, cunning, charged with some underlying agenda. Especially in our age of villainized or ideologized art and rage bait, Chopin's work stands in stark contrast. I want to take Chopin precisely because he's irrelevant or neutral and use him as a symbol and through him explore how backwards many of us, including myself, seem to conceptualize reality these days. I will use all philosophy symbolically in juxtaposition because it was my first love and the foundation I built my life on, but I now realize that it might have been wrong. So with this video, I will explain how Chopin forever changed the way I see philosophy and even our being in general. But let's start from the beginning. Many of you might actually know him without even realizing it. But who was this Frederic Chopin? Luckily, although not time efficiently for me, I read a few of his biographies and took down a lot of notes, just so I could give you a brief, proper, non-AI gist of his life, just so kind of we know who it is we're talking about. So Chopin was a 19th century, essentially self-taught pianist, exceptional improviser and outstanding composer, although he's not commonly held amongst the greats of, say, Bach, Mozart or Beethoven. He was born in Poland, but at 20 years old left for Paris, which was a hotbed for the movement of freedom at the time, and never returned. Interestingly, he outrightly disliked having public performances, although he of course did have notable concerts. For example, at 15 he performed in front of Emperor Alexander I, but he much preferred private gatherings amongst acquaintances. Most likely adding to his dislike of concerts was the chief feature of his playing style, which was delicacy of tone. He was commonly called the poet of the piano. Chopin as a person was often described in the same way as his playing, as delicate, sensitive, fragile. Most notably, he was a romantic, both personally and creatively, and it is believed that his many romances greatly influenced both his compositions and his celebrity status in Paris at the time. Sadly, he was prone to illness even from childhood and lived a big part of his life with tuberculosis. His productivity declined steeply at the end of his life with his health, and he finally succumbed to it at the age of only 39. With all this said, to truly understand Chopin, we must wrestle with the meaning of his work. For transparency, I am not in any way trained or educated in classical music or composition, so I will not attempt to analyze Chopin in musicological ways. No, my analysis is phenomenological in nature. I am trying to grasp the meaning of his work rather than the means. Chopin is the perfect composer to do this with because he transcends the need for knowledge, which is my point number 1 out of 3. His compositions are human to the core and he forgoes any barriers for entry. No, the only requirement to access this beauty is to simply have a beating heart. To this date, I have not found a more accessible composer. I can show his pieces to anyone and they will almost instantly pay attention and recognize its beauty. No words are necessary. He's not intimidating or overly sophisticated to the point of shying the uninitiated ones away. Now contrast this with the nature of any philosophy. How many would tune away at the mere mention of someone like Schopenhauer or Wittgenstein? How much time would I need to spend to even start grasping what is meant by the thinker? How much effort to show, to prove some idea or argument? Chopin's music proves itself by merely existing. It is effortless in that sense. But what do Chopin's pieces prove? I tried to figure this out for a really long time, but the best answer I could come up with is this. The more I listen to him, the more I feel that we live in a feelingless society. And that is my point number 2 out of 3. But how could that be, right? Everyone seems so passionate about something, the environment, politics, rights, and freedoms. But Chopin's piano, yes, a piano, made me realize that most of what we do is react rather than feel. What I mean is, to exist in our world today is like being constantly poked with a hot iron rod. Sure, you feel some way about it, but how you feel is conditioned by the inescapable fact of being burned. Feeling necessitates freedom, otherwise it is reacting. Music, art, media, you name it, live off doing the job for you, of counting the reactions on a post, for example. Chopin, being the genius that he is not in the least bit concerned with you. No, he simply disinterestedly invites you along for the journey. Paradoxically, this indifference is the key to be able to truly feel, but you must give it your full attention. With Chopin, you full stop and listen. Crucially, your attention is not grabbed by manipulative means. The music naturally shines forth to you. It does not rely on whether you see it or not. It would not make a bit of difference to it. It exists for its own sake. Needless to say, I think this is a mystery in our world today. For me, Chopin's music puts the rational to shame, or at the very least questions it. Through his compositions, I feel how disbalanced the world today is. How much emphasis on the thought out, on the rational. His piano encourages me and inspires me to simply feel. To feel how it is rather than to think how things are supposed to be. To embrace the other without any claim. Counterintuitively, by accepting rather than trying to control, I feel free to stop and let go of my temporary goals. Ease the clutches of constantly aiming at something. To simply pause for a bit and appreciate beauty without any point to it. These are just words, and I am sad that the best thing I can do is merely talk about it. But if we must dabble in the realm of syntax, let us turn our attention to philosophy now. Funnily enough, it was Kant, a philosopher, who understood true art precisely in the way that I have been describing Chopin so far, as purposive in itself. Kant thought that art, when done right, is created without a function, a goal, a utility, without a moral or rational purpose. In this way, art can be defined as simply disinterested, non-utilitarian beauty, or as is commonly used, art for art's sake. You might have gotten the impression that I see art and philosophy as in opposition to another, but Kant and Chopin is a great example of how the two poles, the rational and irrational, should actually work in union and in harmony. And this brings me to my point number 3 out of 3. Kant verbalizes and brings to consciousness what Chopin expressed in the realm of undifferentiated feeling. This process is the eternal archetypal dance of chaos and order, most notably symbolized by the yin and yang. Philosophy, with all its arguments and statements, is undoubtedly a brilliant and necessary part of life, but I realize now how devoid and empty of meaning it is without the sound of music to accompany it. You see, without Chopin first, what would Kant even have to rationalize? The irrational is like a deep, dark lake, and the rational is the fisherman who pulls out his catches from its depths. Inherent in this imagery is an order and a relationship. The latter relies on the former and not the other way around. But lately it seems that we pretend as if there is no lake and the fisherman somehow magically gives birth to the fishes with some magical formula on his part. This is the impression that floods me time and time again when I look out into our world today. I see so many naively acting like they are hovering in the air, supported only by scientific rationale. Many of us fall into the trap of over-relying on the miraculous capabilities of their intellect and end up eating their own reality from the inside, ending up dry and hollow. And what a fascinating paradox, by the way. The more emphasis on logic and reason, the less orderly and meaningful the world starts to become. Yet a dive into the pool of colors, notes, symbols, and feelings magically allows everything to fall in its place, and harmony emerges. That is, of course, if you do not drown. The fear of drowning is what plagues the hyper-rationalists in my eyes. They seem to lack inherent trust and seem to prefer to box, categorize, and abstract to distance themselves from the incomprehensible mess of being, but by doing so, they also fail to see beauty. Trust, therefore, plays a crucial role in our existence, not in leaders or institutions or saviors or movements, as we are painfully learning today, but in the inherent possibility for goodness in our world. My favorite idea from Nietzsche, and I believe he understood perfectly the need for balance between the rational and the irrational, is that a philosopher's job is to use a tuning fork and tap on the shell of ideas and listen for the sound they make, for the sound will reveal the truth of their meaning. Well, I much prefer the ringing of Chopin, don't you? Nietzsche also had a piercing critique of philosophers that is relevant to consolidate the 3 points I made. In short, he wrote that what all thinkers do is merely build their own monument, construct their own justifications, although disguising them under simplified, universal, rational systems, which by the way also tend to ignore the poetic aspects of our existence. This ties perfectly with Kant's idea of art that we discussed. In this way, philosophy can never be disinterested and exist for its own sake, no matter how hard it may try to do so. Choose any philosopher and you will be led one way or the other, but to repeat myself, Chopin's pieces are simply there. They're unconcerned with explanations. In a universe increasingly seen as devoid of meaning, it stands as meaning itself, unchangingly beautiful, unable to be influenced or manipulated, unable to be twisted or disfigured. It is whole. This is inherently what attracts us to art and is at the foundation of human freedom as well. Because if Chopin's nocturnes, which I have been playing throughout this video, can exist for their own sake, then perhaps humans can too. To be valuable without our value being tied to a purpose, a function, or a goal. Dostoevsky wrote that man is not a piano key, and he was right. But the question still remains, what is man, if not a key? Chopin makes me wonder if we could be the notes themselves, allowing music to be possible in the first place, composed into harmony, played into existence, simply to be. Isn't beauty and goodness justification enough? For once, I beg you, do not think these questions away. Listen to Chopin for a while and see if the answers do not come to you on their own. Chopin was a romantic, and maybe I am as well, but in honor of his life and work, I wanted to write this essay echoing his style. So please, do not take it for a hard-boiled statement of universal truth, because it's not that. Take it for what it is, a love letter. Thank you for watching. See you next time.